Privileged to be in the backcourt with Ant-Man if you are a point guard. Imagine feeding that brother the ball and how good, Vinny and Wendy, Ant-Man can make you look. First of all, he could do it on his own. He could create his own shot. But you add to that LaMelo is his own threat. He can shoot the ball. He can handle the rock. He certainly is an elite passer. And then it becomes even more interesting and compelling.
LaMelo Ball is a Minnesota Timberwolf. Read that sentence again. The number 3 pick of the 2020 draft, a former All-Star, second in the entire NBA in three-pointers made last season, is now lining up next to Anthony Edwards. And the Wolves didn't ease into this quietly. They emptied the vault. Naz Reid, an unprotected 2033 first-round pick, 3 pick swaps, 3 second-rounders, all of it gone within 12 hours of the draft ending. Here's the thing, though. Minnesota wasn't a bad team. They made back-to-back Western Conference Finals and still couldn't get over the hump against Oklahoma City or San Antonio. So they went out and got the one guy they believed could change that. The question now is whether LaMelo Ball is the missing piece this franchise needed or the biggest gamble it has ever made. To understand why Minnesota just bet the next decade on a single trade, you have to understand what the last 3 years actually looked like. This was a team that went further and faster than anyone expected. A franchise that spent 20 years as a punchline suddenly became one of the most consistent contenders in the Western Conference. Back-to-back conference finals appearances in 2024 and 2025, a Game 3 blowout of Oklahoma City in the 2025 conference finals that set a franchise record for points scored in a playoff game. For the first time in their history, the Timberwolves weren't just surviving the playoffs, they were a fixture in them. But every spring, the same wall appeared. In 2025, Oklahoma City sent them home in 5 games. Outside of that one blowout victory, Minnesota lost the other 4 games by a combined 73 points. The following season, they ran into Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs in the second round, and when Wembanyama was on the floor, the Spurs outscored them by 79 points across the entire series. Different opponent, same result. Teams with multiple players who could create their own shot kept punishing a team that only had one. And that's the Anthony Edwards problem in a single sentence. Edwards put up a career-high 28.8 points per game last season. He's already a 4-time All-Star at just 24 years old. He's tied for 4th all-time in 30-point playoff games before turning 25, sitting behind only LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Durant. He is a legitimate top 5 player in this league when he's locked in. And it still wasn't enough. Every playoff series, defenses would load up, send 2 bodies at him every time he touched the ball, and dare anyone else on the roster to beat them. Nobody did. The supporting cast was good, just not the right kind of good. Rudy Gobert remains the most disruptive defensive center alive. Jaden McDaniels is one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball. Mike Conley brought veteran composure and calm, but there was no second engine, no second creator, nobody capable of taking the ball out of Edwards' hands and making defenses actually pay for overcommitting to him. You don't win a championship in the modern NBA with one guy shouldering all of the creation. The Wolves knew it, Edwards knew it, the entire league knew it. So when the opportunity arrived, they didn't hesitate for a second. Day 2 of the NBA draft. The first round was already wrapped up. Most of the league had moved on, and then the reports started coming in. Shams dropped the first one late at night. The Charlotte Hornets were listening on LaMelo Ball, and aggressive offers were already on the table. By the time most fans woke up the next morning, it was already finished. 12 hours from rumor to blockbuster. That's how fast this unfolded.
Here's the deal in full. Minnesota receives LaMelo Ball and Josh Green. Charlotte receives Naz Reid, an unprotected 2033 first-round pick, 3 first-round pick swaps in 2028, 2029, and 2030, and 3 second-round selections in 2029, 2032, and 2033. Read that list again slowly. This was not a tweak. This was not a deep move. This was a franchise-altering reset. The Wolves gave up Naz Reid, the 2024 Sixth Man of the Year, a fan favorite with jerseys on every rack at Target Center, a player who was next in line to start at power forward. They gave up draft capital stretching deep into the next decade. An unprotected first-round pick 8 years from now is the kind of asset that can end front office careers if it lands in the wrong spot. And none of this happened in a vacuum. Just days before the LaMelo trade, the Wolves had already sent Julius Randle to Brooklyn in a separate deal. Randle, a three-time All-Star and their second leading scorer at 21.1 points per game last season, gone. Two All-Stars out the door inside a single week, inside a single draft cycle. This is not a team retooling around the edges. This is a team going all in on a single thesis. The thesis is straightforward. Anthony Edwards, paired with the right co-star, is enough to beat anyone in the Western Conference. Not just compete with them, beat them. He looked at the asset war Minnesota was already losing and decided the only way forward wasn't to slowly stockpile picks over several years. It was to swing the biggest hammer in his toolbox while he still had it to swing. The reactions came immediately. Some analysts called it the boldest move of the offseason. CBS Sports graded it a B+ and labeled it high risk, high reward. Others called it reckless, a team mortgaging its future for a player who has missed 141 games over 3 seasons. The grades were all over the map, and nobody sat on the fence. So the question isn't whether Minnesota changed the conversation around their franchise. They obviously did. The question is whether they changed it in their favor. Because to understand why this works, you have to understand exactly who they just brought in. Start with something the highlight reels glossed over. The number 1 pick of the 2020 NBA draft and the number 3 pick of the 2020 NBA draft are now in the same backcourt. Not just the same team, the same backcourt. That rarely happened in the history of this league. In the modern era, it is essentially unprecedented. That's the headline. Now look at the numbers. LaMelo Ball last season, and this is the version of him most casual fans have already forgotten about because he was buried on a Hornets team that missed the playoffs, averaged 20.1 points, 7.1 assists, and 4.8 rebounds per game across 72 games. He stayed healthy, and he finished second in the entire NBA in three-pointers made with 272. More than Stephen Curry, more than Jason Tatum, more than virtually every shooter in the sport except one. Now stack that next to Edwards, 28.8 points per game, 5 rebounds, nearly 4 assists, a 4-time All-Star at 24, an MVP candidate every time he's healthy. Do the math that the network analysts weren't doing in their first take grades. Combined, this backcourt produced nearly 49 points and 11 assists per game last season on 2 completely different teams in 2 completely different systems. Together, with better spacing, better defense behind them, and actual screens being set for them, those numbers go up, not down. Here's why the fit works. Anthony Edwards has spent his entire career as the only player on his roster capable of creating offense. Every possession ran through him. Every defense knew it and planned accordingly. Now he's not the only option anymore. LaMelo is one of the best pull-up shooters and transition creators in the league. He bends defenses in ways Minnesota literally never had on its roster before. And it works in reverse, too. LaMelo has spent his entire career being the primary creator on his team. Now he isn't either. He gets to play alongside a downhill freight train who draws every help defender in the building. These are 2 players who each make the other's job measurably easier. That's the ideal version of a co-star pairing. Now look at the rest of the roster around them. Jaden McDaniels still locks up the best perimeter scorer on the opposing team every night. Rudy Gobert still controls the paint. Dante DiVincenzo re-signed for 5 years and provides another connector piece. Mike Conley brings veteran intelligence off the bench. Josh Green is a 3-and-D wing who arrived with a starting spot essentially waiting for him. This is not a top-heavy gimmick built around 2 stars. This is a legitimate 2-way roster with 2 superstars leading it.
But every story like this has a catch. And with this trade, the catch is impossible to ignore. Let's address it directly. The reason this trade was even available, the reason Charlotte was willing to listen, the reason a 24-year-old former All-Star with 3 years remaining on a max contract could be acquired at all. LaMelo Ball has missed 141 games over the previous 3 seasons combined. Read that number again, 141. That's nearly 2 full seasons of basketball gone. Ankles, hips, wrists, the injury history is real, and it isn't something to minimize. The biggest question surrounding this trade has never been about talent. He's a former All-Star averaging 20 points and 7 assists, who finished second in the NBA in three-pointers. The talent was never the question. The question is whether his body can hold up for 75 regular season games and a deep playoff run. Because if it can't, this entire trade unravels. The second concern is just as significant. LaMelo Ball has never been a plus defender. Not in college, not in the pros, not on any tape any scout has watched. And the Western Conference will hunt him for it. Every playoff series Minnesota plays will open the same way. The opposing team puts their best wing in a ball screen with LaMelo, forces the switch, and goes to work. Every single time. That's the legitimate case against this trade. But here's the rebuttal most analysts missed in their early reactions. Last season, LaMelo played 72 games, a full, healthy year. That's the first time he's accomplished that since the 2021-22 season. He changed his body. He overhauled his training approach. He returned to Charlotte as a more mature and more vocal leader. The Hornets even reported he was beginning to show genuine defensive effort for the first time. There is actual on-court evidence that the version of LaMelo Ball arriving in Minnesota might be a meaningfully different player than the one who spent the previous 2 years on the injury report. And on the defensive end, the Timberwolves are specifically constructed to protect him. They have arguably the best defensive center of his generation in Rudy Gobert. They have a top 5 perimeter defender in Jaden McDaniels. They have length, switchability, and rim protection at nearly every position. Of every team in the NBA, Minnesota is the most capable of absorbing LaMelo's defensive limitations. If any system can mask his weaknesses, it's this one. Now zoom out. The Western Conference right now belongs to Oklahoma City and San Antonio, and then there's everyone else. Without this trade, the Wolves were looking at a 4th or 5th seed, running back the same formula that just got exposed in back-to-back playoff runs. Same ceiling, same wall, same exit. With this trade, the ceiling resets entirely. They become a genuine problem for any team in a playoff series. They become the matchup nobody in the West wanted to draw in round 1, the team no one was circling on their calendar before, and the team everyone is circling now. This is the move you make when being good isn't good enough anymore, when you've already proven you can win 50 games, when you've already pushed deep into May. The Minnesota Timberwolves stopped trying to stay in the contender conversation. They decided to try to win it. So where does that leave them heading into next season, and what does it mean for the rest of the league? For a decade, the Timberwolves were a punchline. For 3 years after that, they were a legitimate contender. As of this week, there's something else entirely. The number 1 pick of 2020 and the number 3 pick of 2020 sharing the same backcourt. The best defensive center alive, a first-team all-defense wing, a veteran-anchored bench, a head coach who made back-to-back conference finals. This is not a roster hoping to compete with Oklahoma City and San Antonio. This is a roster built to beat them.